Hey guys, it's Jeff here. Just want to thank you for joining us for another episode of True Crime, Myths, Legends, and more. I'll tell you what, I was at work today and I was messing with a dolly, right? And you had to move this thing. And as I was like fixing the dolly to put it back in the original position that it was in, I pulled out the handle and it hit me right in the chin, and I bit my tongue. So if you guys hear that I'm not quite as good with my speaking, it's because my tongue is swollen. That's why. So just in case you all want to know why, it happens sometimes, occupational hazard, and never good when you also do speaking and talk to people. And I have a whole weekend where I'm going to be doing nonstop talking to people. So by the time Sunday rolls around, I probably will not speak for a day or two. I know that's hard to imagine, all you guys out there, and it's probably true because I never shut up no matter what. But that's just how it goes. So again, thank you guys for sticking with us here and tuning in to all the episodes. We've had some great ones recently. I just released the Phil Chalmers episode talking about the myths of serial killers, which is kind of what we do here. And so that was really kind of cool. Another big thing, my book, Beyond the Headlines, just won an award in history for the International Impact Book Awards, which is super cool. I would have never expected that, but thank you guys for for buying it and checking it out. I'll show you another thing. This T-shirt. We will have some merch for the podcast coming soon. So the True Crime Expert shirt. I don't know. There's about 5 or 6 shirts designs that I've been working on. Those will come up and they're already on the Etsy. So you can go check out the Etsy. But I'm going to post them in the community section here because technically, until we get monetized, we don't have a store. But we're getting there quickly. You guys keep sharing it, keep liking, keep subscribing so that we can get there faster because that's great. But tonight, we have an incredible guest with us tonight and a good friend of mine, a doctor of psychology, which is always fun, right? Uh, I when I first started doing all of uh, my serial killer psychology talks, I would have doctors of psychology come up to me after the talk and therapists and stuff, and they're like, "Man, that's really good, man. I really came to hear you talk because I thought that you were bullshit." And I laughed and I said, "Well, uh, I've been pulling the wool over everybody's eyes for a long time, and I guess I still am. So I do my best, and I guess I know some things. I keep learning. I promise. The learning never stops, and that's part of the reason why we do this. But Bill Kimberlin is our guest tonight. He has a lot of acclaim, going to death row executions. He also happens to have the largest collection of death row artwork that I have ever seen in my life. It is unbelievable, and I have seen it personally, which is really cool. Like this little bit of stuff behind me, nothing compared to that second bedroom. I'm just saying. He's got some pretty cool stuff, and really, really super humble guy. So we're gonna bring Bill on right now. Let me hit the button. Hey, how's it going, Bill?
Hey, Jeff, how are you?
I am fantastic. Excited to talk to you. We don't get to talk nearly enough. And
No, I know it's been a little while, but first, let me get a few things out of the way. Congratulations on your book. That's an amazing honor. Your award-winning book like that. The fact that have your games that you have invented and are still just churning them out. People love you. Your podcast now, and you know you're one of the very few that I love to actually sit down and discuss everything with because um, while you may not be a doctor in psychology, you should have that honorary doctorate because I'm telling you, I could talk to you every day, all day when it comes to the psychology of true crime and killers and death row and everything else. So I don't think you give yourself enough props. So I'm giving them for you. It's an honor to be on your show, and I'm honored to be able to call you my friend.
Absolutely. I appreciate you, man. You have, it's been really cool to get to know you these last several years. I really came to it because of the book and a lot of people's recommendations because you've been all over the place doing all kinds of things. And I always just thought it was so unique. Some of the stuff that you've been able to experience, the people that you've been able to talk to, uh, just the discussions that you've been able to have. And then, you've always been so incredibly humble about all of that, which is a unique quality because, as you know, in our industry, that's not always the case.
Absolutely.
There are a lot of people out there that build themselves up, whether they deserve it or not,
Right.
and it's just kind of it's part and parcel, I guess.
Some of them are really good at touting themselves and building themselves up, and good for them. I mean, that's great. But like you said, people that follow me know that I typically never post names of the individuals that I'm interviewing or the artwork, who it's from or whatever, unless they DM me, and then I'll tell them privately, because I don't like to glorify any of those individuals on death row. I have a lot of projects going on right now that I really can't talk about, publicly anyways. But when like Jeff, you reach out to me like, hey, what's going on with this? I can tell you that with no problem. But in the same token, I've reached out to you on questions, and I don't think people understand that. They'll see that doctor in front of my name, and I have degrees in criminal justice, sociology, counseling, substance abuse, and psychology. And dude, I don't know everything. Hell, I don't even know where I'm at half the time. So I don't think people give you enough credit. So I want to give you the credit.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So, for those of you that didn't get a chance to see it, I have it right here.
Hmm.
This is Bill's book, Watch Me Die, Last Words from Death Row. Fascinating read. I got to get that copy personally when I was down in Florida, which was pretty cool. Uh,
Can't wait to have
um,
you back.
Absolutely, man. I don't know when I'm going to be. I will be back down in Florida sometime later this year. Actually, I'm doing a show in St. Pete this year.
That's where I'm at.
Uh, yeah,
So
so I'll be in St. Pete. Oh, you better believe I'm going to hit you up for
yeah,
sure.
might as well stay here. Seriously.
Yeah, I'm down.
As long as
Yeah,
you can sleep in the room with nothing but death, because you saw that, and it's only gotten more crowded in there with death row since.
I'm just saying. I mean, do you not see my background? It'll be fine.
I think I had last time you were here. I think I had over 3,000 pieces then, and I have no idea what I have now. I don't. I mean, I just can't keep up with it. That's my wife Wendy's job. I open it up, I look at it, I'll take a couple pictures once in a while, post it, and then I toss it. There's stacks everywhere.
Yeah, yeah, and he's not lying, guys. I've been there. I've
Yeah,
seen it. There's bins in the
yeah,
closet, under the bed, in the
everywhere.
nightstand,
Yep.
and just like artwork all over, all kinds of artwork.
Yeah.
Like some that's really really great and very very talented people
Mhm.
that have created this artwork. Other people that do really weird shit with artwork, and
Yeah.
sometimes it's even shit.
Yeah.
So
Blood, semen, everything. I have it all.
yeah, it is certainly unique, and yeah. So here's the question. We'll start out this way. How the
Okay.
hell did you get into all of this?
Yeah, it was a fluke. I'll be honest with you. So when I started teaching at the university in Ohio, um, psychology, abnormal psychology, social psychology, the whole gamut of psychology classes, um, the same uh, debatable topics back then, we're talking almost 20 years ago, are the same ones that we have today, which is the legalization of drugs, gun rights, abortion rights, and capital punishment. I grew up hunting all my life, and still do. So I don't even know how many guns I own, but I knew everything about the gun laws. I've been fortunate enough to travel a lot of different countries. Been to Amsterdam like 5, 6 times, so I knew a lot about the different drug laws. I've had the unfortunate opportunities to counsel females and also being in abortion clinics, so I knew about that. What I didn't know about was capital punishment and death row. And the readings that I was going through, they don't really have the professional journals out there dealing with death row. So I always said I would never be the type of professor that was book smart only. So I said, that's it. I'm going to go to death row. And luckily, my best friend's a judge in Ohio. Contacted at the time, Betty Montgomery was the attorney general. I said, hey, I need to be put on the lottery or list to go to death row, to execution, whatever. And they very kindly hung up on me the first time. And I called back. I'm like, I don't think you understand. I explained my situation. And the receptionist secretary was very polite to me. She's like, listen, the Ohio Revised Code sets the laws on who can go to death row, who can go to witness an execution, and so forth. But since nobody's ever really asked us this before, I'm going to send you the list of people that are scheduled to die in Ohio over the next 2 or 3 years. I'll send you the Ohio Revised Code. If you can find any loopholes, have at it. So they did. I found some loopholes. I was only going to go to death row a couple times. We started in Lucasville and moved to Mansfield. And I happened to be there one day interviewing a couple guys. And one of the guys that was getting ready to be executed said, hey, you want to watch me die? Hence the title of the book. And I said, sure. And that started this journey down this rabbit hole that I've been doing ever since. And it's grown from Ohio to all over the country. So
wow. Yeah. So and I know we've talked about this before, but the audience hasn't heard this. I had a former relative by marriage who was a prison guard in Lucasville.
mm-hmm.
And so they were escorting an inmate down the hallway. At one point, the inmate ended up having a violent outburst, ended up like smacking his head off the ground, I don't know, 15, 20 times. He ended up, and I mean, he survived the encounter, but he has a degenerative spine disorder now because of that encounter. He ended up leaving that job, obviously, and doing a bunch of other things. But yeah, it is, there are some things. It is a very, very dangerous place.
It is. Absolutely is. And I call them hobbyists, but there's a lot of people that like to go into death row just to say they went in there and talk to a couple people and claim they're experts at it or whatever. But it can happen anytime. I can remember I was scheduled to interview 4 out in San Quentin at one time throughout the weekend, and I flew out there. And when I got out there, there was a guard that was on the pod of where 3 of my guys were. That was all slit up. They slit his throat, the wrist, everything. So I only ended up seeing one guy that entire trip, which was Philip Jablonski then. But you never know what to expect. I mean, there's no handcuffs, there's no shackles, there's nothing when I go in there and see them. I eat with them, I drink with them, have last meals with them. If it's their time to get executed. Down here in Florida, I'm with 25 of them at one time in the same room. 25 death row inmates. We're walking around. We're eating out of the canteen, getting pizza and pop and whatever, getting your pictures taken. You can play games. You can do whatever you want. And they're free to walk around everywhere. So,
wow.
Yeah, that's the stuff you don't see on TV, unfortunately. So
Yeah. And I think that is a whole different world that people don't understand because, we hear a lot of things. And of course, there's a lot of, it's always, ever since it's been a thing, it's a hot topic, death row, capital punishment. And it's a very difficult and divisive topic. What do we do with, criminals? And, then at the same point, at the same time, what do we do, with people that end up getting exonerated?
right.
Because there are those people too. So it is, it's a very, very difficult, very touchy subject for a lot of people, understandably so,
Yeah.
because there have been mistakes that have been made. But there's also people that Jablonski is one of them.
Yeah.
People that obviously, did what they did and, will pay the ultimate price.
Right.
So,
Right.
here's something that's interesting. What is it like for the typical death row inmate on death row?
So I guess it would depend on the state. So I'll use like Ohio, since that's where you're at. For instance, um, they have tablets, so they email all the time. They call all the time. They can write. They have art supplies that they can buy. They have regular click lists. So like, I think you guys probably have like Kroger's and Meyer in Ohio, where we have like Publix and here. Whatever is in those stores, they can order, or have people order for them. Usually 3 or 4 times a year, huge boxes. They want, the Hostess cupcakes, the Twinkies. They can get the beef jerky. They can get the seafood. They can get anything that you can imagine, shipped right to them, right on death row. They're out of their cells more often than not. They can intermingle with one another on their pod and their tier. Um, One of my guys that I eventually witnessed his execution was Frank Spizak, who ended up becoming Francis Ann. He would have sex with inmates on death row, all the time, to the point where he's like, "Hey, we can't talk about this in letters anymore because the guards are getting on to me, and then they're going to cut me off, and I don't want to get cut off before I get executed." So, I mean, they have a lot of freedom, more than
Wow.
most people would ever imagine.
Yeah.
So.
So I think it's interesting with that being the case. And we talked a little bit about that like in the live that I did last week because we were talking about Gacy, we were talking about death row and the interview I did with Karen Conti.
Mhm.
And I think it's interesting, and I mentioned this that there are a lot of liberties that death row inmates get because the guards know that this is it. This is their final stop,
Right.
right? So, what do you do to make somebody comfortable as they're awaiting the last ride,
Mm.
And it becomes really, really difficult because, here's the thing: these guys are already sentenced to death. They have nothing to lose. So
Right.
as a corrections officer, what do you do with these people?
Right.
Because there's no more punishment to give
Right.
them.
Right.
There's no way to control their behavior, and 90% of them are already murderers,
Right.
right? So
Yeah,
do you
so
go in there
yeah,
and do a bunch of punitive things to these people where they can come and get you? Like
sure.
probably not the best idea.
It's a fine line that the prisons themselves have to walk. So first of all, the interview that you did with Karen Conti, she's a brilliant attorney and great interview. I love her to death. She's an amazing person too. So she has a lot of experience in the field. But if I'm the warden and you're the CO on death row as the warden, I have to protect the interest of the public. So I have to make it seem like they're locked down 23 hours a day with pump sunlight in, and that's it. That's why when the cameras come in on death row, they're shackled, they're chained, they're behind glass, and everything else. The reality is, though, the guards are doing the brunt of the work. They need an easier population to govern because death row is a prison within a prison. They have nothing to lose. You can't even get on death row unless you've murdered. So again, these are the worst of the worst. So what's the best way to do, to control that population? Keep them happy and not let the public know that they're happy. So that's the reason why that when Ohio has had different death rows, obviously from Lucasville to Mancy to Youngstown to Chillicothe, now Ross. A few years ago, when I was still in Ohio, they wanted to move it to Toledo, and the guards are what kept it in Chillicothe because they didn't want to switch populations. They didn't want Toledo to send the young people to Chillicothe and the death row inmates to go there because there's no fights on death row. There's nothing you have to really worry about amongst each other. If you're a child molester and you're on general population, you're not going to sleep well at all any night that you're on that general population. But you're a child molester, murderer, and everything else on death row. You're just one of the guys. So It's very clean on death row. It's very quiet when I go to death row. Everybody gets along for the most part. The ones that don't like each other, they'll say, "Yeah, that dude's an asshole over there. I don't mess with him. Whatever. They don't mess with me. Whatever." But it's nothing like it's going to cause them to get in a physical altercation.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting because typically the people that end up being problems or are like have real issues that have outbursts and stuff like that, those people end up in in administrative seg
Yes.
and they're stuck by themselves,
Yes.
which is like there's we were talking about on Tuesday, we had talked about Wade Wilson and some of the stuff that's going on with him, and
Right.
he's kind of a perfect example of that. This is a guy that's acting out because he's got all kinds of crazy things going on. So
He wrote me. He wrote me as soon as he got on death row.
really,
Yeah.
really,
So I have a good reputation on death row. I don't think it looks good on a resume, but people know that I don't sell them out. I'm not out there to make money off of them or anything. And I talk to them just like I'm talking to you. So there's a lot of trust and respect that goes both ways. And Wade Wilson is going to have to uh, find his own path within the next year or two, and then he will probably just go away and slink into the depths of Florida's death row, meaning that he's not going to be the novelty that's out there now for the women and everything else. It's right now everybody always wants to get to the people right on death row as soon as they get there, if they're high profile, and of course he is, because of the tattoos and he's striking looking and all that stuff. But the reality is those tattoos mean nothing on death row at all. They're not going to protect him. They're not going to do anything like that. What's going to keep Wade Wilson from getting his teeth bashed in is him not overstepping his bounds, thinking that he's better than any of the other killers on that death row. And sometimes you'll see that's what causes a lot of arguments. In Ohio, it was at the time I was the first one to interview Anthony Sowell, and he wanted to be known as the most prolific serial killer in Ohio. And realistically, he killed 11 drug addicted prostitutes, all female. And that's what pissed other inmates off, that he was going around bragging about that. So they kind of ostracized him for the longest time until he got with the program. So, they'll make it miserable amongst one another in there. But at the same time, once they come around, they'll click. Tommy Ziegler, he's one of the very, very few I've ever dealt with that's always maintained his innocence. He's been on death row for 47 years, I think.
wow,
One of the longest ones. And they just came out with some new DNA evidence that could very easily exonerate him. But
wow,
even the guards have said all along that he was innocent.
yeah,
His family was massacred, murdered, and obviously he's living. So they're like, okay, back then you're the living one, you're the ones going down for it. But I mean, nice gentleman on death row, and probably doesn't even really want off of death row because he has no life on the outside. His entire existence has been, death row.
yeah,
So, so there's a lot of respect for those guys on death row amongst other ones. If they are assholes to other ones, they're going to be treated as such. So, yeah. So
well,
way to find his way.
yeah, you think of that. There's certainly a hierarchy, right?
Yes.
Whenever you end up in any of these like closed systems, there is you end up fitting into some kind of role,
Mm-hmm.
because that's just how society works, right?
Right.
Uh, Wherever you're at, you end up fitting in and figuring it out and working your way in there, or you don't end up being there very long.
Right.
And in that kind of system, there's no way out of it.
Right.
So if it's going to happen, they're going to handle it themselves, and they'll give whatever justice they feel is necessary
Mm-hmm.
to keep somebody in line, because nobody wants to deal with all that shit.
Right.
So yeah,
Their cells are their house. They have a single cell. Their cell's the house. The pod is the neighborhood. They want to make sure that that neighborhood is running tight, and when there's no issues, then they can get away with a whole lot more collectively. So I had a guy on death row, not one that I dealt with, just happened to be from my hometown, so I was there for his sentencing for death with the mother and I knew both sides of the family, victims and defendants. So it was an odd situation. But when he got to death row in Ohio, he smoked a lot of weed and drank alcohol, because you can get everything on death row, and to the point where he was acting out, and the other guys had to put him in place a little bit to calm him down so it wouldn't take it away from everybody. So.
Yeah, because they would be very protective of the liberties that they have.
Yes.
And if they piss off too many people by attracting attention for all kinds of different reasons, then the warden will shut all that shit down. Nobody wants to be locked down in that kind of situation.
Right.
So yeah.
It's
crazy.
Different society, man. Different society.
Yeah. It's a whole ecosystem to itself. I know, just like you're talking about, death row is a different ecosystem than like a county jail. And so I worked in a county jail as a corrections officer, and sometimes it's even more difficult and more explosive in those situations because you have a lot of people that haven't made it to trial yet. Right. So there is no fitting into to any kind of hierarchy, right? They don't get that opportunity. So these are people that may or may not be guilty, that may be still dealing with pending trials. Some of them are, they skipped out on their child support. Other ones have murdered people, right, all in the same location, all in general population together. Mm-hmm. And, they try to do a little bit of segregation, but it's not really possible because those people are not convicted of crimes yet. Right. So, it becomes a very, very difficult balance with all of these people together. It is literally a powder keg of people with different personalities, different psychologies that are forced together to try to coexist for 3, 6, 12 years, sometimes a couple months. Mm-hmm. And so it's an interesting ecosystem there right, that was always, you really never knew what was going to happen.
No, so every day was different. Every day.
That is for sure. I walked in one time, and I walked into some of the dormitories that we had, and I think it was 42 inmates and one guard in these dormitories. And I went in there, and I walked in, and there were white guys on one side of the room, black guys on the other side of the room. And I walked in, and I thought, oh, shit. It's about ready to be a bad day.
I know.
I'm like, I don't know what's going to happen. So I happen to know both of the leaders of both sides. I knew them pretty well. So I went to each of them, and I was like, hey, I know y'all were having some problems last night. I'm here today until 2:00. I would like to go home at 2:00.
Right.
If you guys can chill out while I'm here, go and do what you need to do. Go and work out, go and sleep, whatever you need. Mm-hmm. Just don't cause problems while I'm here.
Right.
And so I left at 2:00, and by 2:15 there was a riot in the dorm.
Right.
And
but you talk to them just like you would talk to anybody else. You didn't act better than them or anything. So, and it's a learning experience. When I first started on death row, like I said, in Mancy, I wore a suit and tie. I was better than everybody. I'm a freaking doctor. I know everything. Well, they treated me very, very well. The warden did it in Mancy, and they would pick me up at the gate in a golf cart and drive me back to death row. And then they'd pick me up and take me back. Well, apparently the guards didn't like that. So like my 4th or 5th time there, they locked me out in the yard at Mancy during count switch. And there I'm standing there in the middle of the yard with like 2,000 inmates. I'm suit and tie. You can't blend in. Everybody walking by. You a lawyer? No. You a lawyer? No. And I'm like, good Lord. And I know they're watching me. They're sweating me. Those guards are watching me. And I'm thinking, okay, somebody's gonna roll me anytime, And then the
Yep.
guards will be like, we better save Kimberlin, but we're union, so we better take our break first. So yeah, that wisened me up real quick. So
I remember when I was working there, you'd have the back pod, and you'd have people in there, like 6 or 7 people to a room, to a cell back there. And of course, being a new officer, you'd go back there and they'd look at you, and they knew you were new, right? That they knew that you had just started, and
yeah,
they're always talking shit, like, oh, Ignatowski, he's afraid to come in here. So of course, I'm like, pop the door. Like, I
right,
don't care. I'll walk in there. You don't scare me.
right,
I'm here. I got to do this job. I don't want to have to get into a confrontation with you, but I will. Now, my saving grace working there, at the same time, back then I was still fighting. I was actively fighting professionally. And
Mhm.
so I was coaching a bunch of people at the time. And so there was another corrections officer that all of the guys were afraid of. And he was a big old farm boy. And he would come and train with me. And there were a couple times he came into work and he had a black eye and a swelled up lip and everything. And they said, "Man, what the hell happened to you?" And he said, and he would always tell him, "You don't want to fuck around with Ignatowski." Like, he did that to me. And so, like, they're like, "Who? The guy with glasses?" And so, like, I ended up getting a pass because of him. And I mean, it was true, but the guys really were kind of like, yeah, maybe we don't want to say anything to him. And
Right.
so I would play it up in the dorms. There was one guy who was a former, like, ranked boxer. And he was in there. I don't remember what he was in there for. But he was really good. And I told him, I said, "Hey, before you get out of here, I'll go in the bathroom with you and I'll spar with you. I don't care." And so we did. We went back there one day. We had we had a bunch of inmates standing around watching, and I'm back there in the bathroom, and he looked at me, and we squared off, and he said, "Man, I ain't gonna mess with you, Ignatowski. I'll leave you alone." And I'm like, "We're here, brother. Let's go." And he was just like, "Man, I don't want to hurt you." I was like, "I think that you're not so sure right now who's gonna get hurt. So that's fine." But
Yeah.
he was a very nice guy. But yeah, it was.
Everybody gets tested, man. Everybody gets tested. And, like I said, I've learned a lot over the years, from the death row inmates themselves. It's not me walking in there. When I first started, like I said, suit and tie, I'm shaking hands with every CO and guard and everything else. And little did I know that's a big no-no. They don't want to see me, you know, talking to corrections officers. They don't want to see me associating with them, um, because then there goes the trust. So I had a guy tell me one time, stay the hell away from them. They're no good. They're dirty. You know, they'll let anybody in here. We decide if you get to go home. They don't. So I'm like, all right. He's like, it's our house, our rules. They'll let you in. We decide if you get to go home. So just remember that. So, I mean, all right. So those are the little lessons that humble you real quick on death row.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
Because especially when you're talking about that being in a room with 25 other guys who have all killed people. Like,
Mhm.
there is no. They'll be in here and like,
Yeah.
for those of you that have never been in a prison, it isn't instantaneous that those doors open,
No.
right? There are electronic locks, and there is 30 to 40 seconds before the door even finishes opening the lock sequence, right? And so during that time, with 25 people in there that may or may not have any kind of weapons, it's too late.
Right.
They're
Not
not
to
going to come in
mention,
and get you.
not to mention when the other door has to shut and lock first before the next one opens up. And I'm
Yeah,
like, are these things controlled by hamsters or what? They're so freaking slow. But
yeah,
you know, it's knock on wood. I've been very safe and secure on death row, because of that mutual respect. I do respect every single one I see on death row. But I had to earn it, just like they've had to earn my respect. When I first started out, everybody had to admit that they were guilty, or I wouldn't deal with them. That relaxed as I started branching out to other states. So, obviously, some people like Scott Peterson and them that I deal with all the time, Tommy Ziegler and them, they're innocent. That's fine. You can stay that way. But for the most part, my main focus is what really brought you here, and teach me everything that you know, and let me get inside your head. I like the criminal thinking aspect. When I get the artwork sent to me, people want to see the artwork. I'm looking at the envelope. I'm looking at how much they spent on postage. I'm looking at how they packed it, because nothing is cheap and nothing is free in prison. Why are they spending this money on me? Because I don't buy it from them. They send it. So, if it's a serial killer that hides certain things in paintings, I'll look at that and study that a little bit. For the most part, I set it aside. I'm more interested in the package. That's why I like handwritten letters. I'll study the way they write. Whether say the envelope, if it's a free inmate letter, they get one of those, every 2 weeks. Am I the only person that or am I that important that you're using that envelope on me? Those are the things that I look at. Where, again, the ones I'll call the hobbyists, they want to get in, they want to get out, they want to be able to say, oh, I spoke to 100 serial killers, or I've seen 50 people on San Quentin's or whatever. My circle is small. I've dealt with countless murders. I don't label them as serial killers yet, because that term has changed 3 different times since I started. Before it had to be 4 or more, then 3 or more, now 2 or more. And, there's different reasons. I've learned that the why people kill. But I follow them. I've been with some of these inmates for well over a decade, getting inside their head, learning about every aspect of their life, and not publishing anything about them yet, because I'm not done with them. So it's it's taxing sometimes. It's mentally draining other times. I mean, it's plus, like you have a real job. I have a real job on top of all this. People expect you to do all this stuff, and the amount of people that say, "Oh, I want to do what you do. I want to go to school. What'd you do? What classes do you take?" I'm like, it doesn't work that way, dude. It just you got to be committed. So
Yeah, there's a lot about, being at the right place at the right time, having
mhm.
the right demeanor, the right personality, to be able to do a lot of this stuff.
Right.
Because you're right, there is a rational trust that has to happen anytime you're working with anyone incarcerated,
Mhm.
right? There is a different. It's just like people that are undercover, right? That have
Mhm.
to go in to people that are not, in this
Right.
closed system, that are out in the real world, but they have to go in and they have to become those people to
Right.
prove these different things. But it's, you're dealing with the same people with the same mindset in the prison system. So
Right.
there is still that qualification that you have to have. You got to be able to get down on their level, because if they don't trust you, that's when it becomes dangerous.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, you took the words right out of my mouth. It's trust and complacency. You don't want to be complacent. The fact is that I respect them. Do I trust any of them? Probably not. Because the moment you let down your guard, the moment you get complacent, something could very easily happen to you.
Right.
So I just treat them with a lot of dignity, respect. I talk to them. I joke with them. I mean, humor is the best way for me, anyways. When I sat down with um, Solwell, for instance, and he, tried I'm the most prolific serial killer in Ohio, and I'm like, yeah, but you kind of suck at it. Otherwise, we wouldn't be sitting here having this conversation. And he bust out laughing. He's like, oh, you got a point there. So you break the ice that way. I'll speak to these guys, one on one. I'll eat with them, everything for hours, days, weeks, and never mention what their case is about. Finally, they'll be like, "Don't you want to know what I did?" I'm like, "Obviously, you killed somebody. Like, look around. Everybody has on this floor, this pod. So you really weren't that great at it, because I wouldn't be here talking to you. So talk about the weather, talk about the politics. Least amount of questions I ask them, the more they tell me." and and they open up, um, but they also expect you to open up to them as well. So when they ask me some of the most personal questions about my family and places like that, people like that and places they work, they already know the answer. They just want to see if I'm being truthful with it. So, everything's fair game. They knew where my wife taught. They know where my daughter went to school, my son went to school. They knew who their favorite, sports team was and singers were, everything. They'll send you paintings with their mascots or drawings of their favorite, rock singer or whatever, basketball player, and without me telling them, just to let you know, hey, we kind of know, because they always have people on the outside. Unless you're sentenced, everybody's sentenced to life without or death. People are walking around the streets. They've been inside. They know them. So, it is what it is. I accepted that responsibility when I stepped foot on death row, and I still accept it to this day. So,
So, so you mentioned this earlier. You mentioned really talking to them and getting inside their head
mhm,
and finding out and understanding, why many of them kill. So,
mhm.
so what have you found out?
So I would say the most common denominator is that they're dangerously normal if you're talking serial killer wise, because that's what seems like that everybody always focuses on. And I'll be honest with you, I see the other people on shows or podcasts or even on mainstream TV, and that everybody always wants to say, yeah, that person is narcissistic, and they have antisocial personality disorder, and they have this and this, diagnosing them without them ever being qualified or trained to diagnose anybody, and it's all based on what they've seen on TV. Um, and I can tell you with 100% certainty that there are so many different types of murderers out there. And what I try to do is get inside their head to see, why did you kill when you did at that time? You know, um, was it opportunistic? Was it drug psychosis? Were you so high and out of your meth or crack or whatever you were doing, your PCP and that you were going to do whatever it took to get that drug, which led you to kill? I've talked to guys that have killed two or three people in one setting that had no backgrounds before in violent behaviors. Their thinking was, oh my God, I'm breaking into their house. I didn't think they'd be home, and now they saw me, so I'm going to go to jail or prison for B&E or something like that. I can't do that, so I might as well kill them. So that irrational thinking at that moment. Um, so when you have somebody that's under a drug psychosis or that lack of impulse control because they're not thinking clearly, that's different from the person who has this wanton disregard for human life, that enjoys killing, that has maybe progressed from raping and torturing to killing, and it manifests from there. Um, and again, talking to these individuals, you see somebody on TV. You take Wade Wilson, we'll just use him for example since he's the hot topic. People will say right now, oh, he's narcissistic, he's this, and this, only based on the snippet that they see on TV, or him being brought out in handcuffs in open court, or if I went to see him on death row tomorrow, I'm certain he would still have that chip on his shoulder. But you have to sit back and say, okay, was he always like that, or is that environmental now over the last year, coming from the county jail, which county jail sucks. Most people that I've talked to in prison would much rather get shipped to prison than sit in county jail because they have much more freedom. But you also have to keep this look about you, this, that chip on your shoulder, because you don't want to get complacent as a prisoner on death row or in general population as you're waiting to go to death row, because anybody can take advantage of you and they don't want to see you weak. So are they putting on that show for me? And a lot of times they are. I can't sit there and say every single person is a narcissist, every single person has psychopathy, or every single person has sociopathy, and anti-personality, this and that. It takes a long time to diagnose somebody, way more than anybody just seen them on TV for a split second or even an hour-long special, because they haven't been in that environment with them, that setting with them. If I interview somebody on death row around those 25 people, they're different than when I have them in a room one on one. Totally different because they have to keep up that image in front of the other ones, in front of the other visitors, in front of the other inmates. But when I get them one on one, totally different person. Are they going to cry then? Yeah, a lot of them cry. Are they remorseful? Some of them are very remorseful because they can't believe they made such stupid decisions at that moment to kill their neighbor because of the fact they didn't want to go to jail for B&E. And they thought at the time, well, I got to kill him. That way nobody will know. Not thinking it through that murder is a very difficult crime to get away with. And it's going to lead right back to you because they had no experience in it. Take somebody like Samuel Little, who reached out to me because I taught at the college where he was from in Lorraine. That's where he was born. And his best friends lived in Sandusky, where I lived. So he reached out to me. He thought we were homies and everything else. That dude liked to kill. He loved to kill, but he wasn't smart about it. He was smart about the victims who he can control, drug addicted prostitutes that aren't going to be noticed disappearing right away. That's why got away with it for so long. He actually went to trial in Ohio for murder and beat it. I mean, he got acquitted and everything. So that didn't stop him. He had that impulse of wanting to kill. So then when I find, my serial killers that I'm dealing with, I want to get inside their head to see the little things. I'll ask them, when you strangled them to death, did you go from behind or did you go in front? The majority of them will be like, oh, I went to front because I want to see that life leave their, eyes. Those are the ones then that, have psychopathy going on that are very, very dangerous and will never, ever, ever change. But then you also have somebody like I had the only female federal death row inmate, Lisa Montgomery. She was mine. I was fascinated with her because while she was very petite and very mousy, the fact that she stalked this individual who was 8 or 9 months pregnant under the guise of going in there to buy a dog, only to kill that woman, to take the life of that woman without taking a weapon in that house, going into the kitchen, getting a butcher knife, and performing a near perfect C-section after taking the life of a human being without, this was before YouTube or anything else. So she was able to remain calm, cool, collective, and steady enough to where it only nicked that baby right there. The baby lived. She kidnapped it, took it across state lines. That's what made it a federal offense. And I was supposed to be at her execution. They executed her the last year Trump was in the last administration, but COVID, they wouldn't let me in Terre Haute, so I didn't get to see it. But I mean, I was with her for years. That fascinated me because you can't teach somebody that.
Yeah.
I mean, I look at somebody, I've come up on car accidents and everything else where, even people that has a seizure and you're like, oh my God, I'm freaking out. Now, imagine putting yourself in that person's shoes that has watched that person, was able to talk yourself into that house to look at a dog that she was selling in order to kill her, but do it enough time that baby wasn't starved from oxygen too long so the baby would be healthy, and to do a C-section with a butcher knife out of the kitchen and not do any damage. That's fascinating to me on the psychology of that. That's the stuff I try to look at. So.
Yeah, you, man, yeah, you have to wonder, where did that knowledge and that know-how come from? Like, how long did they study that
Right.
and plan that? Because like it's almost nearly impossible to get everything right in a
In
situation
a
that
situation
is
like that,
high stress.
exactly. So if I watch all the medical reviews right now, and I did actually through college, human growth and development, I've seen how it's done over and over and over. Do I think I could do it? Hell no. No. Let alone if I killed the person right then and had to get that baby out in time for the baby to survive without hurting the baby. Fascinating.
Yeah.
So
You think that so what ended up being her motivation to do that?
she couldn't have really any other kids and she
Okay.
wanted her own kids more.
So
Yeah.
so that obsession that she had with having her own, and believing that this is the only way that she could achieve that, had to be the driving force to
Yeah.
really push her, that
Yep.
extreme amount of obsession to understand how to do this and how to do it right, because she was going to get what she wanted regardless.
Right.
Uh,
And had I had more time to study her, I'll be honest with you, I took my time with her because I thought no federal death row is going to get executed, especially a woman. And then along comes the new administration at the time, and I was proven wrong on that. But I was thinking to myself, okay, is it just the fact that she wants more children? Is it the fact that her other children are grown and she wants to have somebody to depend on her, like a baby, can't survive without me? Was there something going on in the marriage, or she doesn't feel loved anymore? So here, this baby will love her unconditionally. Those are the things I would have liked to have explored more. But sometimes you run out of time. Frank Spizak, I ran out of time with him. He killed the people in Cleveland State University. He wanted to be the next Adolf Hitler, the next head of the Aryan nation. So he hated everybody that wasn't white, Anglo-Saxon, Protestant. Hated gays, hated Jews, hated blacks, everything. Fast forward, gets sentenced to death row. He decides to change his name from Frank to Francis Ann. He petitions the court to have a sex change. His minister that he had to read him right and minister him was African American, and he was having sex with other people on death row with other guys. So he did a complete 180. And I'm thinking, okay, what is going on here? Because you hated all of these individuals that you now have representing you, and the fact that you wanted that gender reassignment. But then execution time came up. I, again, not knowing everything, and the best of the best can be fooled. I was one of them. I thought he was actually remorseful. I was with him in the death cell just prior to going to witness his execution. So the death cell sits here in Lucasville. The death chamber, they have to walk from the death cell to the death chamber strapped on the bed. I was sitting there, I was talking to him, listening to him really. And the Supreme Court had just sent over the final ruling where the execution had to go forward. Guards handed it to him. He handed it to me. He said, you might as well keep it. They're going to kill me. So I thought he was really remorseful. He talked about everything like that. He goes to the execution table. They strap him down. He gets to make his last statement. And what he starts reading it off in German. And it just infuriated the other witnesses on the other side, from the victims, the state side, to the point where they wanted to go through the glass and killing themselves. That just showed they had no remorse for them whatsoever. And here I'm thinking, this guy is really remorseful. You just never know.
Yeah. And that's a fascinating thing because, we often talk about this, when you're talking psychology, that the people that are ardently against something are often the people that are really hiding the fact that they have these impulses and they feel this way, and often it's a form of self-hate, that they hate these feelings and these desires that they have. So then they end up hating all of those people who are free out there to go out and to do what they want, and they wish that they could have the same kind of freedom but could never accept it within themselves.
Right.
So
And then, I sit there and then I reflect on it all. I look at all the letters that, because he really wanted to be called Francis Ann. He dotted the I's with little hearts. And, it was just fascinating to me to see this transformation happen. And I was given a talk over in Ybor City, I think it was last year. And one of my friends on Instagram was there to see it. And we were talking about it and they were asking questions about remorse and everything else. And I said I was fooled at the end. And he came up and he's like, don't you think it's odd that he hated all the Jews, wanted to be the next Adolf Hitler, and he really just changed his name around from Francis Ann, where maybe he was thinking Anne Frank, and he still hated him all along. He just wanted to try to fool everybody. I'm like, perfect. You're probably right. But sometimes when you're so enmeshed in your education, psychology, and everything else, you overthink things sometimes.
Yeah.
And that's why a lot of these sleuths or whatever you want to call them out there on the internet, they're great resources. They're absolutely great because I'm not the kind of guy that wants to be so narcissistic, so to speak, that think I know everything. Where these other individuals, that are on social media, they'll text me or send me DMs. Hey, what about this? What about this? Great ideas. They're thinking outside the box. I'm looking strictly professional. They're looking from the outside, and 9 times out of 10, they're right. So that's why I love interacting with everybody on social media that I can, because they have some really good. I think personally, law enforcement should use individuals out there more often.
Yeah, there is certainly blinders that
Yes.
happen, whether it's from academia,
Yep.
because we're studying all these things,
Hmm.
whether it is from the law enforcement community. They get these blinders and they only see things from a very one point of view,
Yes.
whereas other people that have the capability and the time to look at things from a different angle
Hmm.
often catch things that the experts
Right.
don't catch, because
I would have never
it's
caught that. I would have never have caught that.
yeah,
And this was years and years later. This was just last year. I'm thinking, damn it, man. But again, we have tunnel vision sometimes. We want to focus on what we think is the obvious, and the obvious is really right there in front of you that I've
yeah.
looked over the top. So I'm the kind of guy, I appreciate it all. Anybody that throws I'm not the kind of guy that's like, oh, you have no idea what you're talking about, because no, tell me everything, because I'm still learning. 20 years later, I'm still learning, because you're dealing with the most complex organ ever, the brain, the human brain. And these individuals, man, um, they are something else. You get them in a closed setting on death row to where you can pick their brain. It's amazing what you can find out from them.
So that's one of the reasons why I always try to have a pretty wide view of things.
Mhm.
I don't like to just take one line of thinking. I like to hear things from all different sides, because I think that you can't really have a well informed view of anything unless you're willing to listen to everything. You don't have to believe it all, you don't have
Right.
to agree with it.
You got to keep an
Uh,
open mind.
yeah, but understanding, like I just did an interview with John Wesley Anderson, right?
Mhm.
About John Benet Ramsey, of course,
Right.
an open case.
Right.
And I was always uh of the viewpoint that the family had something to do with it, like
Yep.
most people are,
Right.
right?
Right.
And after talking to him and looking at all the evidence that Lou Smits had come up with and everything that they had gone through, there was a lot of evidence there that I had not seen before, because you put the blinders on because everybody, this is common knowledge.
Right.
But when you really look at the evidence and when you really look at the police reports, the DNA reports and stuff, it tells a very, very different story. So, I had to take a step back and reevaluate, what do I think about this case? Because what I always believed to be true doesn't fit this evidence. Like,
Right.
it just doesn't fit. So, and I think that there are a lot of people out there that won't take the time to really dig in and understand things
Hmm.
and to look at all the evidence in its totality. And there are ongoing cases right now. Idaho 4 is going on right now. There's Everybody has different opinions about that. I have not been really following that case a whole bunch,
Hmm.
but I really need to. But I just haven't been. Delphi, I have,
Right.
and I think that that case is one of those that there is some crazy things that have happened in that case. Um, I have a hard time believing that they convicted a guy. I thought that there was a lot of reasonable doubt there,
I agree
and
with you 100%. I mean,
and
yeah, go ahead, because I
no,
agree with you on that. It's uh, and again, that just shows you never know what a jury's going to do, because I still work
yeah,
with the courts to this day. So most of my career has been working with the courts. And that one there has baffled me from day one. From the moment they took him from a county facility to a lockdown, maximum security, 2.5 hours away. The fact that there's so much reasonable doubt. Period. Again, from what I know. Now, I also know working for the courts that what they show on TV is not what the jury sees. And, there's evidence that isn't permitted to be allowed in. And anything can happen. I was shocked at down here in Florida with the Casey Anthony one. I thought dead to rights, guilty. But again, you got to keep that open mind because I'm only seeing what the court TV is allowing me to see.
Yeah.
And, working vaguely with law enforcement because of some of the projects I have, where I have locations to bodies and stuff like that. Law enforcement doesn't like to let outsiders and academia in either. So, I've gotten some pushback on law enforcement as well, even though they agree that the body's there. I'm not willing to share my maps if you're not willing to share or work with me. So, I mean, it's, I look at the O.J. Simpson trial. I was out in L.A. When that verdict came down, just about, may have been just a little before or after. But I went to his house. I got my picture taken in front of his gate and everything like that. Crazy time out there. But that new documentary out right now shows an abundance of evidence that was not permitted to be accessible in the trial itself. So, I mean, the Delphi one, that one, I would love to know more about that one. I would love to sit down with that Kohlberger personally, and talk to him. I find him fascinating because I have my own theories, not about the murders itself, but I find it difficult to believe that he could have done that all by himself for the first time, meaning that there had to be others prior to for him to be that good at what he did on that one, or there was other help. And again, I don't know because I'm not privileged to that information or that evidence, but I find him pretty fascinating to see.
So that is one of the things that, in the Delphi case that I really struggle with that, I don't know if Richard Allen did it or not.
Right.
But I certainly, looking at the evidence that's out there, don't believe that he could have done it alone.
Correct.
So, with the way that it happened, the time frame that it's supposed to have happened in, man, there's not a lot of time
No.
to do and to stage things the way that they were at that crime scene. So it's like, okay, maybe he was involved, but there's got to be something else here. Like
Sure.
there's more than that. And now it's coming out that there is possible DNA evidence that has not been tested, that is from an unknown male that does not match with Richard Allen.
Right.
So, there's a lot of stuff that's coming out that was not allowed in the original trial for whatever reason. And like you said, from the very beginning, the whole transferring him from the county facility into, maximum security is almost unheard of.
Right.
Like that doesn't happen to someone who is not convicted of a crime yet.
Right.
Typically you go through the court system and then you end up in, this other system.
Right.
So like to do that, you have to look at what are the motivations now for that happening. And after, when you look at all the trial and stuff, you look and it seems pretty obvious what the motivation was, because when he was in the county facility, he was denying everything. When he moved to this facility, all of a sudden now he is like dealing with a lot of psychosis. They're putting him on medication. He's by himself. He's only seeing one person a day. That person may or may not be feeding him information. And so now he cracks. And, as we know, under those kind of extreme circumstances, people being people will cop to anything,
To
right?
get
Like,
Yep, absolutely. I
yeah,
mean, it's common knowledge. And I know the town can't really say, well, we're a small facility and high profile. I come from a small town, Sandusky, Ohio, which we're known for Cedar Point and Kalahari. But when I was PO there, I was doing all the pre-sentence investigations. Our county jail held 120 people. It's a small jail compared to where I'm at right now that holds over 3,000.
Yep.
I was going in that jail every day doing, pre-sentence investigations, and we had three high-profile murders in there, all based on Hell's Angels. It was on America's Most Wanted. They filmed it there and everything else. Stephen Yee, Mark Verdi, and one other one, where they killed a guy, mistaken identity. They thought he was an outlaw. He wasn't. Killed the wrong guy. Plus, we had two other murderers in there for totally separate. So we had 5 murderers, 3 high profile, 2 regular in a 120 bed facility in a small town. You can't tell me they couldn't have kept Richard Allen where he was at. So, past experience kind of comes in. I'm like, wait a second, that doesn't sound right. I also look at, the female victims. And I think they were like 11, 12, 13. They were,
they were young.
Yeah. So, and I'm thinking, okay, this guy didn't know them or they didn't know him. They're on this long train track. And again, I'm only privileged to see what everybody else saw. And I hear this guy say, okay, down the hill. And they may have said there's no path or something like that. That's all that was said. And my thinking is you go up behind any 11, 12, 13-year-old girl, especially 2 of them. If I'm a stranger, I walk up to them, I'm saying, hey, you 2 down the hill. They're going to talk. So they're going to say, who are you? We can't go down there where my parents are waiting for us. They're going to say stuff, in my opinion. I could be totally wrong, but that's from my experience of dealing with adolescents and everything else. They're smart mouth no matter what. And if he was that old and decrepit or whatever looking, I'm certain they could have high stepped it off that bridge, quicker than him. And he probably wouldn't have chased him. I don't know, but it just seemed that there was a lot of reasonable doubt.
So that brings me to this, and I think it's really something that really wasn't brought up at trial at all. It's being discussed now, and of course, there's appeals and things that are in the works now, and I wonder if it'll come up on appeal. But there is a really good case for this being people that the girls knew because of that reaction.
Yes.
Why would you have a reaction like that? Why would you end up going down a hill unless you were there to meet somebody, or you were going down and you saw people at the bottom of the hill that you already knew, and this person that came up behind you was somebody that you were familiar with? And we know, because of the Franks memo, that that there is a whole group of people that also confessed to this crime that knew the girls, that were like, one of the sons was dating one of the 2 girls. And so, like, how is it that that their very, very flimsy alibis are not really pushed any more than that? And then we have this guy who has no connection with them, who has no connection with the girls, and there is very little evidence to even put him there other than himself saying that I was on the bridge that day. Like, how do we get to that place?
Right.
And it's baffling to me, because when I look at criminals, when I look at killers specifically, rapists, if the police are asking, like, hey, if you were there that day and you saw anything, you don't call in.
Right.
Like, those people are typically smart enough, or at least criminally savvy enough, to not go to the police and offer any kind of information. They
Right.
get caught because somebody else saw them there and can place them at the scene. He
Right.
called himself. Like,
Right.
it seems
And it seems really far-fetched. And again, I'm just reaching because I'm not privileged to the information. I don't know what the rules of evidence are in that state. That's, I went to law school for a year. It was not my gig. I went to Michigan, and I was like, okay, that's enough. So I got like a thumbnail of legal experience on that. I've just always worked for the courts. Karen would be the perfect one to ask all these good questions to. But from a psychological standpoint, with Richard Allen, I don't know him and I've never met him, but from all that I've heard, he didn't have a past. He didn't really have a huge criminal past or track record. He was out for years afterwards, I think, because they may have questioned him, but they couldn't figure out who did it until whatever led them to him. I have never really seen or come across an individual, even on death row, that was able to one day decide, I'm going to go out unannounced. I have no idea if anybody's going to be out there, but if they are, I'm just going to kill these two girls, possibly rape them if I have enough time. I've never seen that in the human psychology before, where you have no idea if anybody else is going to be around, if anybody's going to be there. If you're going for a walk, you're going for a walk. You be by yourself. But all of a sudden, these two girls are here, and in the back of your mind, okay, today is the day I, Richard Allen, become a killer, possibly, a pedophile rapist on top of it. I find that very difficult to believe from a psychological standpoint.
Yeah, and the fact that most people, if they are planning things like that out, if they are moving in that direction, they're looking from that. There's evidence, right? They're writing that down. A lot of them keep journals and things like that, where they're or have a place where they're working out those details, and nothing
Nothing.
on any of his devices, notebooks, anything. And it's
Nothing
like
that would lead you to believe that this individual had been premeditating
yeah,
or planning this event that was going to end in the lives of two innocent little girls. Now, did he do it in the past? There was no evidence of that. He lived there forever, so he was known in the community, worked at CVS or whatever like that. Nobody ever had any complaints about him. So again, for somebody from a psychological standpoint, not the legal aspect, but psychological, how does one decide to get up that day, go for a walk, and hope for the best that today I become the killer I've always wanted to be, and nobody else is going to be around to see it, and I get away with it, and I'll call the cops to say, oh, by the way, I was there. It just doesn't really add up.
So speaking of that and switching to something completely different, I'm curious your thoughts with another case that's currently out there awaiting trial, but the Long Island case with Rex Heuermann, who is accused, and now I think he's what are they up to? They're are they up to 11?
11?
Yeah, something like that. 11
Right.
something. And they're potentially Long Island, they believe that there was like 14, 15. So now they're getting pretty up there, that they have connections to him in a bunch of these. And now this is a guy who you then look in his past. They've been to his house several times. Actually, one of my friends that comes on the podcast that does it lives right down the road from him. They're in Long Island. And so, like, there is a track record, there is history. There are things that they found that connect him. All the 23 burner phones or whatever that he had,
Right.
where
The
he was
list that he made of what he needed to do and get rid of and everything. Yeah, very meticulous. I believe he's an architect, anyways, is he not?
Yeah.
So, educated, organized. I guess from a psychological standpoint, I would like to see, did he want to continue, or did he realize that he was getting towards the end? I mean, didn't they find his DNA on some pizza crust or something like that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So something tells me that he didn't want to be caught, that he would have still continued. But he has that double life. When you look at somebody like Dennis Rader, for instance, he had that double life, could blend in well. The best serial killers do blend in. The Bundys blended in. BTK, Dennis Rader, he blended in. Samuel Little blended in because he was in the right environment at the right times and could conduct himself well, to where nobody's going to look at you and say, oh my God, that guy, he looks like a serial killer. No. Most serial killers are very good at what they do because they have, if I'm a white serial killer, I'm not going into an all black neighborhood because I'll stand out like a sore thumb. So they know where they're going to go. Rex Harriman sound like he had a certain specific type of escort or female, petite, brown hair, whatever. And I think he probably was able to fulfill his needs and wants by doing that, and then turn that off when he would go home, and nobody would ever suspect him.
Yeah. I heard some interesting stuff not too long ago where apparently there was some DNA found on some of the victims that leads to his daughter, I think.
I
Uh
heard that too. Yeah,
yeah, which
fascinating if it's true.
yeah,
Um, and I'd be curious to find out, how was it transfer DNA? Was it,
yeah.
did they find it on the victim because he wrapped him up in something that his daughter had used or touched before? I have no idea. But I mean, if she was involved or had knowledge of, I would find that very, very fascinating as well.
Well, and that's the same thing because this is, while this is rare, right? It
Mhm.
has happened before.
Sure.
When you look at like David Parker Ray, right,
Hmm.
the toy box killer,
Right.
his daughter was involved,
Right.
and actually procured a bunch of the different people that they kidnapped and
Right.
would sexually assault. So it's not out of the realm of possibilities
Right.
that they keep it in the family for whatever reason. And I think in the David Parker Ray situation, there were also a lot of drugs and things
Yeah.
that were involved in that
Yeah.
case. So the daughter and the daughter's boyfriend were all involved. Some of that was because of drugs.
Mhm.
That they were having these parties and stuff like that. So you wonder, like, what is the connection there, if there is one? Yeah, that case is fascinating to
It
me.
is. It is fascinating. I agree with you 100%. You even look at Gacy, the way that he, murdered his victims and buried them under the house, and a normal average person sits there and says, "How did his wife not know?" Where the crawl space with all these bodies and everything else. It's crazy. Sometimes you don't want to know.
Yeah.
You turn a blind eye to it, not on purpose, but you tune it out. And I'd be curious to find out if that's how the relationship is with Rex and his wife, soon to be ex-wife. Or I thought she had filed for divorce. Maybe she didn't. I don't know. But the family dynamics would be very, very interesting from my standpoint to see what was really going on in that household.
Yeah, because I think as of right now, he often, like, his wife would travel a bunch, and
Mhm.
he would often encourage her to leave.
Yeah,
So
that's
and
that's good enough. Where, and maybe she's thinking, he's going to do whatever he's going to do, not thinking he's out there killing people. I'm
yeah,
assuming, but it's like when I go hunting to Virginia or something like that. My wife's like, get out of here, go. I need a break. I'm not sitting there thinking, "Oh, what is she doing? Going around killing people?" No, she's sick and tired of me, so whatever. Um, but I find that very, very fascinating. In this day and age, and I know there's a lot of reports out there where there's tons and tons of serial killers everywhere and everything else. I'm not in that category where I believe that there's that many out there that are actively doing what like Rex and the other ones are. I think you'll probably find more open road truckers, taking the victims of prostitutes and drug addiction, females, and killing and disposing of them because they become people don't report them missing. Where Harriman had, these females, if I'm not mistaken, had families and were known, as escorts, and people missed them. They just couldn't figure it out. So I'd be curious to find out what all of that entails.
yeah. So here's something, uh, and again, I'm just kind of curious on your take,
Hmm.
because I think it's really interesting. So there's the theory of the smiley face killer, right?
Hmm.
Or killers, this nationwide cult of people that are kidnapping and middleweight, well, 20 something uh gay men, and then killing them and leaving them in a body of water is the theory.
Mhm.
And of course, there's a lot of, like, they have, I don't know, I think I've heard numbers of up to like 50 to 100 of these cases that are unsolved, that we really don't know. I actually went to one of the locations in Pittsburgh because one of the bodies was found underneath the 6th Street Bridge. And for those of you that don't know, I went to college in Pittsburgh, and so I lived there for some time, and so I know the area pretty well. I walked across that bridge almost every day, going down from North Side down into downtown to go to school. I often took the bus over that bridge, and I went there. And while I was there, of course, this case is unsolved.
Mhm.
I think they've closed it because they said that they fell in and drowned. I think it's closed because of that. However, they also said that the body was there for 3 days, which is impossible because it is a high traffic area. There are a
Mhm.
ton of people that are running right there. There's no way that that body was right there for 3 days in the water without anybody noticing. Not
Mhm.
possible.
Right.
Not even close. That body may have been there for 6 hours, maybe at the most overnight. So like while I was there and I did the video that I did there at the location, uh, there were probably at least 15 people in the 10 minutes that I was there that ran by that were jogging just down the street. And so, but anyway, what are
Yeah.
your thoughts?
So, going to the body aspect of it in water, it's been my experience that you put a body in water, it's not going to stay there for very long. So 3 days sounds completely fabricated to me. Unless that body was submerged and then popped up. Otherwise, it's going to drift. It's going to do something. Um, as far as all the different people and I think you said they were all gay males. Is that correct?
Yeah.
I'm a big believer in empirical evidence. I want to be able to see it, measure it, everything like that. So is this um, more than a coincidence that they happen to be gay, or are they being picked up in these neighborhoods or certain bars? Is it a hate crime? Is it a group of people that are trying to do it? Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I hate to throw guesses out there and theorize on stuff that I don't know enough about, because then I feel stupid. Um, and, and I think that there's way too much of that goes on now, where people just want to jump to conclusions. Where I'd have to defer to what did the medical examiner say about the body. It should be pretty easy to determine if they drown or not, because there'd be water in the lungs. Were there abrasions to the back of the head that took him over? Was there a push mark? Anything like that. So I don't think that's something that law enforcement would have come to that conclusion on themselves. But I find it hard because, listen, I had season tickets to the Steelers when I lived in Ohio, so I'm a Pittsburgh diehard all the way, and I find it hard to believe that somebody would have jumped or fallen off and laid there for 3 days. As much traffic as is going on in Pittsburgh, and it's a very accessible city walking wise. People love it. It's a safe town, so they're all over. Man, people are nosy. I don't know how they walk past a body for 3 days.
Yeah, it's it. And so looking at there's a documentary about it, of course. All of these documentaries are skewed to whatever viewpoint that the
Sure.
director
Right.
or the writers are doing. So but it seems like the majority of the people that they were able to that they believe were part of this
Mm-hmm.
and victims to this were all out at bars that night and gotten drunk,
Mm-hmm.
and then disappeared after leaving the bar. So, they were all picked up about 2 o'clock in the morning after drinking, and people saw them at the bar. And then, they're found a week later in a body of water.
Right.
And, the theory is that whoever's doing this knows that a lot of evidence is washed away when bodies end up in water. It's much harder to get DNA and
Sure.
everything else when you have now this other factor. And there were, I think, several of them, if I remember correctly, seem like they may have been held for some time.
Okay.
So there may have been some torture that happened
Mhm.
before the murder, and then the ultimate dumping of the bodies. But anyway, it is a fascinating theory.
It is.
I don't know how much stock I put in it, but it's
You know,
fascinating.
right, because then you want to look at the totality of it. So is it one or more people that are doing this, and then do they have the ways and the means to a keep this person confined, torture them like some of the evidence may suggest, without being noticed? Do they have the ability to? So I understand getting them from the bar, picking somebody up, that's not an issue, but driving them somewhere to a specific location that contains a body of water that allows them to drag the body out there or place them there without being seen. I mean, there's a whole lot of pieces to that puzzle. And then from a psychological standpoint, I'd want to find out if the person themselves, do they hate the homosexual community that much, or do they hate themselves because they themselves are gay and they have satisfied their urges at the time, feel guilty about it, can't let anybody know about this, kill them, do whatever, dump them. It's just there's so many variables to it.
Speaking of another Indiana case, Herb Baumeister,
Mm-hmm.
at the Fox Hollow,
Right.
uh, that whole case. There's another one where, Herb was married. He was ultimately he was gay, and hated himself for then picking up these men, having sex with them, and then feeling this need to kill them,
Mm-hmm.
and they are literally still finding bodies
Right.
on the property. They're currently, I think they're renovating it and or tearing it down or something. And as they're doing that, they found two or three more bodies and skulls and things. It's crazy. I actually there was a convention down in Bowling Green a couple weeks ago.
Okay.
It was actually on January 11th, because I went and did the show here in Cincinnati, and the guy who owns Fox Hollow Farm was there at the show, and
Mm.
I wanted to go down there because I really wanted to talk to him because it's not far from me here in Cincinnati, going over there to Indiana, and I
Mm-hmm.
was trying to see if I could like get the rights to kind of go there to check out the location and everything. But yeah, I didn't get a chance to go down there.
No. Did you ever make any contact with them to get the rights to go there?
No, I haven't yet. I should probably send a message and see, because I'd love to talk to him too. I think it'd
Yeah.
be
Right.
fascinating just to see. I know that they were having people come out there. They were doing like paranormal investigations and stuff
Sure.
there at the location, and then it stopped. I think it stopped because they found more bodies, and so
Still a crime
uh,
scene.
yeah, and now it's like, okay, well, now that you're planning on tearing down the property and everything, there's only a limited amount of time for anybody to get in.
Right.
So if you're going to do it, you got to do it now. But then at the same time, what are they going to find when they finish that demolition?
Fascinating, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah,
I would like to be there for that, even just to see, what the conditions were under the house, or when they do demo it, or just to see how the bodies were buried.
yeah.
How deep were they? Were they face up? Were they face down? Were they, all of that stuff from the psychological point. That that's what I'm interested in. Is did you bury them face down because the guilt and shame of it, or were they face up? Were they covered? Or, anything like that. So
So what's interesting about that case specifically, speaking of that, and I misspoke earlier, they have not found any heads.
hmm,
He
wow,
took the heads and put them in another location. So
wow,
there are people that believe that he put them upstairs. I guess there's a wall or something, that they believe that the heads are behind that. I don't know why nobody's looked at this point.
I
But
mean, I would think
for,
cadaver dogs would pick that up right away.
yeah, so where are all these heads at? They found all these skeletons and found the rest of the bodies and bones and stuff, but no skulls at all.
Yeah, see, that's
So
fascinating.
yeah, so why? Or what is it just simply that, yes, he was ashamed of all these things, but he needed those uh to keep them with him. Very, very much like Dahmer, right?
Right, right,
And having the altar of all the skulls. Was it
right.
very similar to that? I don't know.
I,
Uh
I don't either. I mean, but I find it fascinating because again, you're talking about killing an individual and burying them, but beforehand, you are decapitating them. That's a messy procedure to go through, and the evidence would be everywhere, blood wise, everything else. How are you keeping them? Are you keeping them in a bag? Are you keeping them in a bucket? How are you preserving them to where wherever you have them located or hidden that they stay that way? Again, that's just bizarre but fascinating.
yeah,
Dahmer was
yeah.
same way.
So there's a documentary that I just watched the other night, and I mentioned this when I was live the other day. I think it's called like Through the Fire, and it was a woman who had given up her child for adoption, and she was like 15 when she had her baby. The people that ended up adopting her uh, were not so great.
Yeah.
So she disappeared, I think, when she was 14. They said that she ran away. Ultimately, at the end of it, you find out that the stepdad or the adoptive father was very abusive, probably molested her, was going around the country and killing people. He is convicted of at least one murder. He had shot at somebody else that same year, trying to kill them. Had like kidnapped like a 6 year old and tried to rape the 6 year old. So all of these things are happening, and now this girl goes missing. They eventually get him and get him to confess. And this is where it gets interesting because he at first says that she fell down the stairs because he hit her and she fell down, broke her neck. And so he dismembered the body, put it in a cardboard barrel, set it out for the trash, and never saw the body again. That is not what happened, obviously, because
Right.
that's ridiculous. But that's what he said. And then he says he confesses to the wife that he like basically mummifies the body. He puts like flowers and everything in there, and then takes her and buries her and says a prayer to try to make the wife feel better, like he tried to take care of her, which
Right.
is interesting psychologically. But what really happened, he never says why he actually killed her. He never says again that he knocked her down the stairs. But anyway, he took the body, and the mother, who had been investigating all of this stuff and pushing the police, knew exactly where the body was.
Right.
She had flown a bunch of drones over the house, and they noticed a concrete pad or something in the backyard that kept changing. Like there would be all these different things, and the body was under there.
Hmm.
And so the body was dismembered and put in 4 different trash bags with diapers in the trash bags to cover the smell, they believe. But it's interesting to me psychologically. When she died, they didn't live on that property, right? They lived at a different property. He
Hmm.
buried the body there and then bought the property and
After,
then lived, yes, and
wow.
lived 100, like, I don't know, 100 feet from where he buried the body. So to me, when I look at something like that, the first thing I think of is, the girl must have been trying to run away because of all the abuse and stuff.
Sure.
And he was not going to let that happen. And he needed, for some sick reason, needed her to be close.
Right.
So he kills her, dismembers her, buries her body, and then buys that property because he needs to be close to that body. And he does. He
Right.
lives there for almost 40 years before they finally figure it out, and he gets arrested
And
for a unrelated murder that happened in 1980. I believe this all happened in 2018 when he finally gets arrested.
wow.
But so in 1980, he kills a woman in Norfolk, Virginia, and so he like goes into her house. He tortures her and then kills her. And so it's just it's fascinating, the psychology behind that. And when you talk
Yeah.
about uh, about Herb Baumeister, and somewhere is a stockpile of heads somewhere,
Right.
and why these people have this psychological need to be close to those victims. What does that give them? And obviously he was going and visiting that site. He was going out there, sitting down, having his tea, whatever, to
Talking,
be close to
conversing.
him.
Right.
Yeah,
And I'm assuming what led up to the killing was, if I can't have you, nobody can, because if she want to leave, so you kill her. And then it makes perfect sense where, that separation anxiety, I have to have her close by. So he buries her on that property, buys the property, whatever. Fascinating. And the fact that he still goes on and kills again, that tells me that he has that propensity of wanting to murder. That maybe that girl wasn't the first, certainly wasn't the last if he kept going. Yeah, so I'd have been curious to find out, what drove him to take the human life to begin with.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah. It's always interesting, and you mentioned this earlier, and I think it's an important point, is that the motivations for murder are always different.
yeah,
There is no way to blanket and say this is why people kill, or this is the psychology of a serial killer,
right,
because all of them come to this differently. The
yeah,
psychology is all different. There are all kinds of different experiences in life, whether there is mental illness that's also involved in that. All these different things come together to create this perfect storm that eventually ends up being expressed.
right,
Whether it is, like you mentioned earlier, that it was, to cover up the fact that they were doing a B&E, and it wasn't really necessarily intentional. They just
right,
felt like there was no other way, versus a guy like, Bundy, who is going out, stalking his victims,
right.
kidnapping them, holding them for some time, uh, torturing them, and then eventually killing them, and then doing that over and over
Over and
again.
over, because that was the hunt of it, is the enjoyment of them.
Yeah,
That's the exciting part. Yeah, nothing gets me more furious is when I hear, I'll see law enforcement on TV, or prosecutors or whomever, and they'll say, the so and so said that they killed him for this, but they're lying. That you really killed him because of this reason or this reason. And I'm sitting there thinking, you can't say that. The person that is talking to you is expressing why they did it. There's no reason not to believe them until you prove otherwise. But somebody sit there and say, they killed him because of this or this or this, or lying about everything else, that grates my nerves, because it takes a lot of time to be able to get a person to open up to you to begin with. And law enforcement typically are not the ones that they want to open up to. They're very standoffish. That's why when I spoke to Sowell on that, the FBI gave me questions to ask him when I was going to say he hated law enforcement. They thought there were more victims. Um, my belief was probably so, but he's too new to death row. He just got there, and they want to use that bargaining chip for as long as they can. So he's probably not going to tell me anything. So, and he didn't. But law enforcement would give me questions to ask him before I went in. Same with a couple other serial killers. It is very fascinating to get inside their head. And then you fast forward to the execution process. That takes a whole another turn. And then I have like 6 other invites to witness executions in different states. And those are trying times where figuring out if you really want to see it or not, and get that mentally invested into it. And then I would say over the years, from talking to so many killers, I've become desensitized as well. You know, we the fact that we had this conversation about, man, where's the heads? Where'd you put the freaking heads? And we can laugh and joke about it because you've been around it for so long yourself, from the inside as a CO to dealing with the inmates and people in your whole, you know, the games, the books, the podcasts, everything else. You're surrounded by it. It's death and murder and mayhem everywhere, and you become desensitized to it.
So, we've talked about this before too, and I mean, I've shared this
Mhm,
with people here on the podcast. So, I have had my own personal struggles with a lot of that stuff,
mhm,
and some of the mental illness when I was younger, and really trying to deal with who I am as a person, so that I don't become somebody like that,
right, right.
has always been a real challenge to me personally. And so I often end up in this unique position to understand things that normal academia can never conceive, because
Mhm,
they've never kind of walked in that same. They're always taking an outside look,
yes.
but this perspective from the inside. Growing up a criminal myself, and
Mhm,
moving into this space where I'm trying to understand, not really necessarily understand them, but trying to understand me, and trying
sure.
to understand why I have struggled with these things too, is a unique perspective. And oh, I remember where I was going with that, because this is important. In your book, you write about this, and we've talked about this outside of here. But one of the people that you talk about in there, I remember reading it, and I sat for probably a day or two afterwards. And the conversation that you have with that person, uh, and his response to those things, I realize is no different than my response to those things. I've I've felt very much the same way in different parts of my life, and it really, like, it got to me. And this is somebody who's killed over 50 people, right?
Mhm,
So, like, this is something very significant. And this thought process, I'm looking at this and I'm reading it and I'm thinking, oh shit, that's a little too close to home, right?
right.
And I think people would be surprised to find that that although many of these people have very diluted thoughts and thinking and ideas about the world, uh, often a lot of them are not dissimilar from some of the things that we feel. Uh,
Absolutely. I always say they're your coworkers, your next door neighbors, your classmates, because again, you get the other people out there that'll say, you know, these serial killers are they're incapable of having, you know, remorse, empathy, feelings, and everything else. The fact of the matter is, you know, whether you're a Bundy, whether you're a BTK or whomever, they killed a lot of people, but that's a small fraction of time in their life. And of course, they have thoughts of love and hate and feelings and everything else. I can't explain why they chose to go down the path that they did and hated the person enough or persons that they've killed. But there's not no part of me for 1 minute believes that they walk around every day that where they don't feel emotions, where they don't feel sadness, happiness. You know, otherwise they wouldn't fit in at all with society. So they're able to work, they're able to hold conversations, they're able to have a family for most parts, but they also have the ability to have such a reckless disregard for human life that they can turn that switch off and think nothing of it as they rape, torture, and kill that person, get rid of the body or whatever, and go back to doing what they're doing. And you know, I've never heard Bundy's girlfriends or Gacy's wife or BTK's wife or anything like that say, "Oh, he's never loved me." You know, I could always tell from day one he's hated me, he's hated the kids or everything else. No, they don't say that because it's not true. They do have that capacity to love, to feel, and everything else. They just have a larger capacity to be able to turn that off, which makes them different from you and I and the rest of society that aren't going out and killing. Because I can tell you for a fact, there's been times in my life I thought, man, I'd freaking take that person out and kill him in a heartbeat if I could. But the difference is, I don't want to suffer the consequences of my actions. They, in prison on death row, they don't care about their actions at that time. Some of them are remorseful because they did do it. Other ones maybe not so much. But what kept us from killing that person that cut us off in the road, or whatever it is, we have that ability to say, nope, not today, not going to happen. I don't look good in orange. I certainly don't feel like, you know. So yeah,
Yeah,
it's that human psychology, man. I'm telling you, it's fascinating.
it is. I have uh, I've always like to say that I've always been very, very good with human psychology and
Mhm.
understanding, uh, you know, how people are. And I mean, to be quite honest, it is also a skill that many of those people possess, or they
Yes,
wouldn't be able to fit into society, right?
correct.
You have to be able to understand other people to get them into vulnerable situations to take advantage of that. Now
Mhm.
they do it from a devious side of things to get what they want or to fulfill some kind of need that they have, whether it's money, whether it's sexual, whether it's some other need that they have, because not all serial killers or murderers are a sexual crime.
Right.
Some of them are not sexual in the classic idea of sexual.
Hmm.
So, you have these people that, are just they have a whole range of emotions. Uh, I think when I was a kid, I grew up in the inner city. I dealt with a lot of the stuff. I grew up right outside of Philadelphia, and during the worst time in its history, back when Philly was like rivaling LA and
Hmm.
Chicago and New York.
Yeah.
And so, growing up there, like we talked about, a lot of the people that are in prison and dealing with that, you have to find a way to harden yourself so that you kill all of those emotions and those feelings, because you won't survive otherwise.
Right.
You can't allow those things to come in. And it was a real strange thing for me when I got into my 30s and all of that stuff started growing back, and all of a sudden I realized, uh-oh, like, why do I feel like that? Like
Right.
I've never felt like that before. And so it's been really a unique process for me to go through, to realize that I do have emotions, I do feel things, and that it really was a concerted effort, because I was struggling with keeping myself safe, with all of the trauma that I had faced, that it was really me who was cutting myself off from all of that so that I wouldn't get hurt.
Yeah.
And it was always a protection for me. So it's really interesting, and a lot of people are not self-aware to
Right.
know that that's what they're doing. They just do because that's what their lizard brain tells them to do
Right.
to survive, and all of these very negative things come out of that. But yeah,
Self-reflection. Self-reflection's tough. You know.
it's,
You have to check yourself sometimes, and the self-reflection can really get to you, especially when you're aware of it. You know, and like you said, you become aware of it, so then you start questioning yourself even more. Like, damn, really, I do think that way, or I did think that way. Why? So then you
yeah,
start analyzing yourself. But that's a good thing. It's healthy because you recognize it, and you have a good community to discuss it with. You have this media that allows you to talk to others, myself, Karen, all the other professionals. On top of you being a professional yourself, everybody bounces off of each other. So then at the end of this episode, I'll sit there and I'll sit back and think, man, Jeff is just as messed up as I am after all. I'm good, because that's what we do. Because we still have to go on with our lives as well, even though we deal with the worst of the worst. When I'm looking for bodies, or I'm watching an execution, I'm going to death row or whatever. At the end of the day, when I come home, I got to be a family man again. I got to go to work, and then I got to go play racquetball and everything else. and everybody else is fascinated with what's going on, how this go, and you really don't want to talk about it because you lived it. Um, it's uh, it's pretty different, but
Yeah. Yeah.
that's what we do.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And giving uh somebody even a small means of having some normalcy or revealing some things, because we all know that it's cathartic to be
Hmm.
able to say what we need to say.
Right.
And many of those people never get the opportunity to do that, whether they feel like everyone is against them, and nobody is willing to actually listen, to have that ear to be able to hear the struggles and the difficulties and the challenges and the faulty thinking, is helpful to them to
Right.
be able to process some of the shit that they're dealing with, and maybe to see it from another perspective. Now, those people, it's too late for them, most of
Right.
them.
Sure.
But that doesn't mean that they can't have a little bit of reprieve from some of that stuff.
Right. That's why I never judge them. I just don't. That's why, I always said my educational training, the counseling part of me, when I got my master in counseling, it taught me to listen more than I talk. I have one mouth and two ears. Let them do the talking. And then the psychology training that I went through allows me or taught me how to not express any emotion. So when they're telling me how they, kidnapped this woman here or this baby here, and they slaughtered them, killed them, raped them, everything else, and I'm sitting there drinking my Diet Coke and eating a bag of chips like it's a typical Saturday, that allows them to open up more because they don't see that disgust on my face. They don't see that judgment come across. Like, how dare you? How could you do that? You sick bastard. And so they're not being judged. So then they open up more and more and more. So that's how I learn from them. And then, we just go from there. Some of them
Yeah.
confess more crimes, and I deal with it as we go along.
Wow. So what does that typically look like? Because we started out with how they live
Mhm.
on death row. So what does that last day look like for them?
So usually, it's a combination of the last 3 days when they transport them to um, the death house. From Chillicothe to Lucasville, because, and I'll use Ohio as the example. Um, they still have to execute them in Lucasville. That's the seat of the death chamber. 30 days prior, they put them on a suicide watch. They'll take them off their pod. They can choose one other inmate to live on a segregated area of a different pod so they have communication. Um, and because, again, Ohio will do anything to save their life to kill them. So they put them on suicide watch. Um, they're allowed extra phone calls, visits, stuff like that. You get down to about the third day, I'll go to Chillicothe. Um, 8 hours. We ordered food, had it delivered, right on death row, Italian food, everything, pizza, spaghetti. They literally delivered it to death row. They never say when they're going to transport them exactly to Lucasville, security reasons. They get to Lucasville. I go to Lucasville. I'm usually at the prison at 5 a.m. that morning. I'd like to beat the protesters and all that. Get in there. They're in the death cell. They're watched. Once they get to the death cell, it's kind of like the Hannibal Lecter thing. I hate to use that example, but it's wide open. And there's 3 guards at all times, 24 hours, watching every single thing that they do and transcribing everything that they say or do. They get up and brush their teeth 5 times, it's recorded. They get up and write a letter or whatever, and the cell only has a bed, a toilet, and a little tiny desk. The toilet sink together, little desk, bed, wide open, no privacy, no nothing. Everything is watched for the last remaining 48 hours. I'll go to the death cell. I'll sit down. That's usually where I try not to say anything at all. I'll usually listen because everything that's said is recorded as well or transcribed. And I don't want them write down anything I say unless it's something that I have to answer questions to with the inmate. At that point, prior to that, I'm in a debriefing room with the defense attorneys because the defendant has asked me to witness his death. A separate room would be for the state's witnesses. There are 3 seats in the death chamber, just like little cloth seats is all. 3 seats, partition, 3 more seats. So there's like 6 witnesses in front of a glass. When it's time for the inmate to be brought over for the execution, they walk him in. He walks right in. They strap him right to the gurney, and then they start the process of trying to find the veins and everything like that to place the needles in both arms. Ohio needs 2 ports of entry. You never see the executioner, and you never see the physician. There is a physician there for 2 reasons. One, to pronounce the body dead, or if the phone rings on the wall, because there is a phone there, and the governor calls or the Supreme Court to stop it, and it already started, they'll bring in the crash cart and all that. Otherwise, there's no nurses, there's no doctors involved whatsoever because of the oath that they take. Prison EMTs are there. The first execution I witnessed, I mean, their hands were shaking. They couldn't find the veins. Took 2 hours or so. They were putting needles in his neck, in his ankle. He literally had to get off the table once to go take a leak. I swear to God, I had no idea this was going to happen. He got up, took a leak, came back. They strapped him back down. They went working on him again. And then, and the only reason I know that when the warden buttons his top coat button, this is assigned to the executioner to start it. And the reason I know that is because I have the only death row protocol that's ever, it's like 500 pages thick. Judge buddy of mine at the time requested it for the state of Ohio. They said, no, it's confidential. He said, well, I subpoenaed it. So for common police court, he subpoenaed it. They gave it to him under the condition that he wouldn't release it to the public. Him being a judge and against the death penalty and knew I was studying it, called me in. He's like, here, you can have it. I'm like, hey, I don't want to get in trouble with this. He's like, you can't, because I'm a public official. I requested it. And once I got it, it becomes public record. So here, you take it. So I have literally the only one. So when the warden buttons his top coat button, that's the signal for the executioners back there to press the buttons. There's a couple of them, so they know who does it. And the drugs start flowing. And, depending on, because even though all of my executions have been lethal injections, they've been different methods, 3 drug cocktails, 2 drug, 1 drug. When the person is no longer moving and they appear to be dead, the curtains will close. They'll bring the doctor out. He or she, whomever it is, will pronounce that person dead if they are. They leave the room, the curtains open back up. And then the time of death is pronounced. We're escorted back over to our respective debriefing rooms. We stay there. The hearse drives right onto the yard to the death house. You have to stay there and witness this as well. They will load the body on the gurney into the hearse and exit the property. And then that's when we're excused to either go talk to the media or do whatever. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it is a lengthy process. It's not.
It is. It is very. And I know you see in the movies the attorneys are running around like a chicken with their head cut off, filing last minute appeals. It is nothing like that. Nothing at all. So, and again, I don't talk to the attorneys either. It's really. It's a odd situation to be in with the debriefing room. I've never met the attorneys. I don't talk to them. I write everything down. As they're discussing stuff, I'm writing it down. They'll ask me, like, what are you writing down? Nothing. I'm just here, for the popcorn. I'm just doing what I do. And they'll talk about everything from where they went to dinner last night, what hotel they stayed at, what are they going to do when they get back home. There's nothing discussed about appeal, last minute filing, or nothing like that. I had one attorney, a female attorney on, I don't know, the second or third execution. She said, you've done these before? I'm like, yeah. And she's like, do they ever start them early? I'm like, are you kidding me? Shouldn't you be advocating to stop it for your client? That's what I'm thinking. I didn't say it to her. I'm thinking, this lady is so unprofessional. Did they ever start them early? What are you, nuts? That's the stuff that goes on behind the scenes that you never really get to record, so to speak. And then when you're in the execution chamber, the witnessing room, the 3 seats, partition, 3 seats, you never come in contact with the other witnesses. They're brought over first from their room so I can see them, who they are. They can never see us. So They go in, they sit down, then we go over and sit down, and then when we exit first, and then they exit, so we can see them leaving. But aside from the three witnesses, then you have the reporters that stand behind you. They don't get to sit down or anything like that. So you may have like Associated Press, USA Today, whomever at that time is witnessing you witness it, and it's so quiet in there. You can hear the pen to paper, the pencils on the paper, and everything. You can hear them writing and all that stuff because they're writing down every emotion that the witnesses are exhibiting as you're watching that person die. So, but I've had the inmates, look over at me, wave. I just sit there. I don't wave back or nothing. I'm like, no way, no how. And you're only a few
Wow.
feet away from them, so.
Oh, wow. Yeah. It's crazy.
It's different. It's different.
Yeah. So how many have you witnessed?
3 from start to finish. I missed one. Actually, missed 2. Jeffrey Lundgren was my very first one I was invited to. Again, not knowing the procedure, I called down the prison the night before, and the assistant warden said, "Yeah, it's not going to happen. They're gonna give him a stay anyways. I wouldn't waste your time." I'm like, "Okay." Woke up next day dead. I'm like, "You rat bastard," I had 2 other stays where right up to the point, and then there stayed, and then one I missed. I just never opened the letter. I mean, I come across it, and I'm like, "Oh, who's this from?" I think Wendy found it. She's like, "Who's this?" or whatever. I don't know. I opened it up, and he was asking me to be at his execution. I'm like, "Oh wow, I guess I better look and see when that is." Looked up, already executed.
Oh, man.
I know it's horrible. Then I have one's not scheduled yet, but down here, electric chair, and then another one in Arkansas, and I think 2 or 3 more in Ohio yet.
Oh, wow. So that electric chair will be the first time you're
Yes.
there for anything other than lethal
Yeah.
injection. Wow.
Yeah.
That seems like
That's
that
like,
would be
man,
wild.
yeah, I don't even, I honestly don't want to see it, but I've already stated that I would.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, no, I think he's released his body to me. A couple of them in Ohio have released their bodies to me after their executions as well. So, I mean, if they have family, some of them will have large funerals and everything else. I mean, they can do whatever they want after that. If they don't have any family and they don't want to be buried on prison ground, they can be cremated and they'll ship me the ashes. So,
Wow. That's wild.
I know.
Um,
I'll save you
so
some.
well, that
Yeah, I know.
so I try not to open this whole can of worms because Lundgren is a fascinating case to me. Of
Mhm.
course, cult leader, uh, and some of the stuff that he did, especially the stuff that he did to his wife, is just unbelievable to me. Like, uh, and I didn't realize that there was a podcast that I listened to that went through the whole case, and this is the Kirtland cult,
Yes.
and Lundgren apparently had a thing for like defecating on his wife, and this was like a regular practice for them, and so like it's just like when I hear the Cleveland Steamroller, the only person I could think of is
It
Jeffrey
was Jeffrey
Lundgren.
Lundgren. So that was an odd one because I never met him. I was invited to his execution. I never met him because I was so new to it. Um, my best friend, who's again the judge, knew the defense attorneys because they have to be death penalty certified in Ohio, and they had tried cases in our county. He's like, "Yeah, I know Henry Ho and them. Just give him a call. Just tell him I said give him a call." So I called. I said, "Hey, uh, I know this is an odd request, but I hear your client's getting executed, and Judge Bennett said maybe that you would let me or he would allow me to attend it." And they're like, "Well, let me talk to him. We'll find out." I didn't think I'd ever hear back from him. And sure enough, I did. And he's like, "Yeah, you can witness it." He said it's okay, and we'll be there as well. So, and then I was dumb enough, called the prison warden, the assistant warden down there in Lucasville, said, "Nah, he's going to get a stay. Don't waste your time." Yeah,
Yep.
live and
So,
learn.
yep. He is oddly enough in the Colts expansion of Killers.
Really?
Lundgren is, yeah,
Nice.
yeah. He's
Nice.
one of the Colts we put in there.
See, I
So
missed it by that much.
well, hey, we've been now going for over 2 hours.
Wow.
So yeah, wow, crazy. But dude, man, I always appreciate you coming on and well talking to me.
Yeah,
Any chance we get together, uh,
absolutely.
yeah, it's always a good time. And like I said, I'll be down in St. Pete later on this year. I will definitely keep you
Where's this?
abreast.
What show is it, and where's it at? Do you know?
It is, I believe. Well, let me check real quick because I don't want to tell you the wrong show on air, and then them yell at me like, "What the hell? You promoting a different show, Jeff?"
Right, right.
Uh, so I don't want to do that. I better look at my files. Let's see. Oh, there it is. And actually, I'll tell you when it is. It's what is it? It's May 31st is when I'll be
Okay.
down there.
All right.
It's World Oddities Expo. Will be in St. Pete.
Nice. All
Yeah.
right.
So
Is it at the Coliseum or where?
see, now you got to ask me like real questions.
Because if it is,
Uh,
it's right down the street from me. So
let's see. Let's look because I haven't really looked to see exactly where it's at. I'm assuming it's probably at the Coliseum. I would assume that that's where it's at,
which is
but
it
we'll see.
sounds huge, the Coliseum, but it's not like Richfield or anything like that. It's um, if you ever watched the movie Cocoon back in the
Okay.
day, that's where they filmed it. The
Oh,
post and
okay.
all that. Yeah, it's cool.
Oh, they have this set up by month. Uh, yep, it's at the Coliseum.
Awesome. So
Yeah, it's
when you crash here and you go through all the art the whole day or two before or whatever, then we'll just pop on down there. I mean, it's literally like less than 5-10 minutes away.
nice. That's
Yeah.
fantastic. Dude, I'll tell you what. Last time I was down there driving across the
Oh,
bridge, thinking about how close that water is and
yep.
all the crazy storms that were coming through, I was like shitting my pants thinking about that. Like this got to be a crazy pace to live.
Uh,
Uh,
well, when you come
golly.
down, when you come down, we'll go right down the street because I'm right by Tropicana Field that's domeless now. Because when that hurricane hit, it took that whole roof off.
That's
Um,
why.
I mean, our whole area was devastated.
Yeah,
We were just very fortunate. So, but yeah, it's we'll have a good time. So I can't wait to see you.
absolutely, man. Always good to see you. Always good to talk to you. I'm sure that we will talk more.
Absolutely.
So sweet, man. Well, I will talk to you soon. I'm gonna do the little final closing. I'll
Right.
drop you backstage. All right.
Okay.
All right, guys. Thank you for joining us. Bill, incredible guy, has done some just wild stuff within this true crime community. If you haven't checked it out yet, I don't know why I didn't do this earlier because I forgot. But make sure that you go and check out his book. It's up on Amazon and all the places. I'll actually put links to it below here so that you guys will have access to that. And then you can follow and check out all the things that he's doing. He's got lots and lots of projects coming up that I'm excited to see what those are going to be and what's happening and all the cool stuff that he has going on. So check us out. Make sure you like and subscribe and do all of those things. Share it. Remember, next week we'll be going live to do a recap about this episode, and we'll talk about it. And I'm sure that Mary will want to talk about the death penalty and her views on capital punishment because she does regularly. So we'll talk about all of that stuff, and we will have a good time. So make sure that you tune in and join us there. Until then, see you guys soon.